So today I want to discuss a question that I hear a lot, and I hope that I managed to do a good job explaining it. And the question is simple: what causes complexity? I hear it a lot, and I think it might be a good idea to record a video and to answer it and refer people to this video every time that I have the question. So I think that I'm going to start with what is complexity, because it feels that different people see complexity in different ways. So from my point of view, when I'm saying complexity, obviously I'm into an organization. And complexity in organization is the uncertainty or unpredictability that created due to the fact that there are so many autonomous, diverse, but heavily interconnected people in organization. Not just people, there are other elements like technologies that add and externals that add into this complexity. But that's the idea of complexity. When I say complexity, for me, there is uncertainty and unable to predict what the future will bring due to the fact that we have a lot of autonomous, diverse, interconnected people, technologies, or in scientific jargon they call it agents. So that's complexity. And the question is, what causes complexity? And there are several elements that cause complexity. If you dive into chaos theory, you will understand them. But I'm going to focus on the main three ones, which I think the most important one. And I'm going to do it by using a real-life example from business, so it will be easier for people to understand where I'm coming from or why I believe that those are the elements that actually create complexity. So the first thing, I'll call it strange governance or strange governing, and I'm merging two ideas together. So every system that we have has something that governs its behavior. And let's take an example that we are going to use all the way through this video, which is the simple system of requesting contracts, verifying that the contract doesn't have any risk, sign them, and enable the requester to use the resources that the contract between them and the company was signed. Pretty simple one. So the idea of governance or strange governance is that over time there is one element that governs the behavior of the system. And in this particular scenario, what governs this system is the availability of legal and HR to review contracts. So they are doing other stuff rather than reviewing contracts, which create circles of their availability, or the system is isolating. But this isolation actually creates circles. Sometimes they are more available, sometimes they are less available. Sometimes they are more available, sometimes they are less available. And this circle is what governs the system. If they will be more busy, then we'll see the line going more towards the middle, which is their availability. If there will be less availability, the line will go more on the outside, and they are able to do other stuff. And there's circular activity. It's always the same. Now, if for some reason there is another element that starts to govern the system, and that's why I call it strange governing, because right now we have two different elements that govern the system starts to behave differently. And the example that I can put in place is acquisition. So let's say that the company started to do line of acquisition, and this acquisition increased dramatically the number of contracts that the company needs to do. So now, instead of just being dependent on one governing element, now we have two governing elements. And in the beginning, the system will behave still with cycles, but those cycles will be between those two different elements governing the system. In some point of time, the pressure of one of them will increase to a level that you won't be able to predict which circle is going to happen. It might be more geared towards availability of HR legal, and it might be more geared into the demand that's coming from acquisition. But those two governing body or governing elements instead of one definitely started complexity in a system. The second one is initial condition. So every system starts with certain initial condition, and those initial conditions over time will have impact on the complexity of the system in the future. And again, let's take an example from purchasing. When the company starts this process or this system of purchasing, contracts were big, they took time to review, and both the provider or the vendor and both the company were ready and acceptable for the idea of spending time in order to reach common ground. Now over time, and that started the system. The system that heavily depend on this initial condition. Now over time, this initial condition changed. What happened is that now many contracts for many apps in the internet or cloud services are much more smaller, and the provider are not willing to negotiate them as well at all. So that changed dramatically what happened in the initial condition. And this tension between how the system was set and what are the current condition of the system need to deal with is creating complexity as well. And last but not least, I know it will be strange to hear it, but this is the reality. Although complexity sounds very complex and non-intuitive, it's actually set up by simple rules that defined and many people are following. And in our example, for instance, there is a simple rule that says every contract needs to go for HR and for legal for review. If they don't see any issue, we can negotiate the money and get a contract. If they see any issue, we need to mitigate it. That might lead for negotiation or might lead for reinitiation of finding a new vendor. Now, those rules might work perfectly fine up until the initial condition or the number of elements that govern the system changed. When that happened, those initial steps start to be part of the reason why complexity is created. So that's all. I hope that I managed to explain in simple way what are the three main elements that actually create complexity. By the way, this is a process that takes time. It's a non-linear process, so in the beginning you won't feel anything, and then all of a sudden, like Corona, it will spike, and in this spike it will create the complexity that we are talking about. So that's all. Sorry, that's all. I hope that I managed to explain clearly. I'll be happy to get any feedbacks for the video. See you next time, and bye.